So Crawford, when we think in the IT space at the moment, obviously we've got a lot of things happening, a lot of things going on, a lot of change, and people are getting almost overwhelmed, I guess, by the speed and the pace at which that things are happening. If we kind of step back from this, you've identified 4 drivers that really we should be thinking about. Just talk us through some of those at the moment.
So where we are today in the IT industry is that we are kind of exiting one era and entering another era. And the era that we're exiting is really what we called client-server computing, where basically we wired the world with all these very intelligent clients, and these things were in the form of a laptop PC or a desktop PC, and then there were a bunch of servers that kind of held our data, and then we started connecting those things together, and we got the power of the internet to basically communicate in new ways and to collaborate in new ways. But now what's happening above that is that the increase in networking capacity, the increase in very, very low cost, low power microprocessor technology has allowed for a world where we're now starting to see new innovations to allow people to communicate in new ways, to communicate on the go, to provide a much richer contextual computing experience. So what we see is these technologies all coming together into something we're calling the third platform. And that third platform is made up of 4 key components: mobile, social, cloud, and big data and analytics. And those together are providing a platform for innovation that's really unprecedented. Now, what we're seeing is that these things have been swirling around for a long time. We've seen social kind of show up about 5 years ago in terms of Facebook and Twitter in sort of a large scaled environment. We've seen mobile really with the launch of the iPhone in 2007 was the dawning of the smartphone. We've seen cloud in different ways for really the last 4 or 5 years in terms of platform as a service or infrastructure as a service or even software as a service with Salesforce.com. But now we're seeing the intersection of these providing new ways to innovate and frankly transform industries, transform the healthcare experience, transform the retail experience, transform the energy exploration experience. And that's what's so exciting about the era that we're in today.
So the trick is to move from the second platform to the third platform. And this is this position that we're kind of stuck with at the moment. And obviously some of these new age companies are making that transformation very quickly because of their speed of agility and the way they're set up. What advice do you give to companies that are thinking at the moment about where they are and clearly where they need to be to get to that third platform?
So it's interesting. The expression we use at IDC is there are some companies that were born on the third platform, right? So they were created on the third platform, and for them, they're in the role of the disruptor, and for them, they can really go and with very little barriers to entry, take advantage of many of these new technologies. Amazon would be a company that was born on the third platform. But for a lot of enterprises, they weren't. What's a scary thought is that in our estimation, well over 90% of the growth for the IT market between now and the year 2017 will be associated with this third platform. So if you're a company that's really locked in the past and locked in old data center computing with client server architectures, you're not going to be participating or using IT as a way to differentiate as a competitive weapon. So from an advice standpoint, the first thing you have to do is you have to embrace these technologies. You have to stop saying that, oh, we don't do that in my industry. The cloud will never be secure. Mobile devices, those are really just a fad, and people will eventually, it'll all settle out. And once it settles out, I'll pick the most popular platform and I'll offer that to my customers. Mobile applications, those aren't something that really applies to my industry. So I'll just figure out what mobile application my constituents, my internal customers want to use, and then we'll support those mobile applications. You have to think about, how do I use these technologies to differentiate, to grow my business? And for a long time, we've talked about IT partnering with the line of business. That's still more true than ever. You have to partner with the line of business in order to innovate. But what's different now is that the way that business in organizations is transforming the end customer experience is being transformed by this third platform. So now the discussion has to change. Now the discussion has to be, as an IT shop, how can I teach the marketing department which mobile app developers to work with to transform our customers' experience associated with our product? How can I work with marketing and sales to develop analytics solutions that will help them understand who are the most profitable customers and who are not the most profitable customers. And that's a big change in terms of the role of IT. It used to be partner with IT so we can deliver IT costs lower, so we can be more efficient. Now it's about how do we innovate with technology to grow our business.
So really, for the first time, IT is now finally in the driving seat in businesses.
In the smarter businesses. In the more progressive businesses, so I can't tell you, it's a very large percent, but anecdotally I would say it's at least 40% of the CIOs I meet with now around the globe aren't technologists. They didn't come from they didn't claw their way up the technological ladder of executive management. They are maybe from the strategy function, maybe they are from the finance function, and they're spending a few years as a CIO to learn that business and then go and become a CEO somewhere else. And this is because they have to understand technology if you're going to use technology as a competitive weapon.
And that's interesting because we've seen very few CEOs come from CIO backgrounds, from technology backgrounds. So basically, if we take your premise, then we would expect to see that change in the next 10 years.
What you'll see in the next 10 years is more CEOs who spent time as a CIO, and they didn't sort of roll up their sleeves and take the backs off of PCs and fight with the dust bunnies to swap out cards at any time in their career, but they spent time in the CIO office and as a CIO, because that's part of being a well-rounded executive. Yeah, I think you'll see that.
We've been having a lot of debate in this country about the role of education in IT and preparing for this new world that you talk about. What advice, what sort of thinking should New Zealand be adopting around its education space, particularly with young people who potentially know more than their teachers standing in front of them?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about this. Math and sciences are areas where we absolutely have to make an incremental investment, and we have to really create heroes out of the math and sciences folks. So, people that have learned to code, people that have used coding to transform businesses, those people need to be held up as examples of people who are true innovators. And on a very large scale, these are people like Biz Stone, one of the founders of Twitter. These are people like Mark Zuckerberg, one of the founders of the founder of Facebook. These are the kinds of people who were coding at a very early age, and from a math and science standpoint, obviously we're very, very gifted. But having said that, I'm slowly becoming more optimistic in terms of how the educational systems will address this issue. Just this past year, I had the opportunity to lecture to a university class in the United States about the future of technology, and I was just struck by how, I lectured for 40 minutes and the class kept me there for another hour afterward, just asking me questions about mobile app development and analytics and big data. And these young adults are fearless. They want to fail quickly. They want to try, and it's fascinating where I compare it with my own experience. What you wanted to do in the 1980s when I graduated university was to join a company and learn how to climb up that rank. And the idea of being an independent operator or a consultant really was sort of code for, there's obviously something wrong with you and you can't get along with people. Now these people don't want to do that. They want to be a consultant. They want to start their own business, and they want to see, as a free agent, how can they change the world with technology. And this is their passion. And I wasn't lecturing to necessarily a technical class. I was lecturing to students that were really learning about really more of a general liberal arts area, but yet they were still interested in how technology intersects with the human experience and how new kinds of applications can change the way people interact with their everyday lives, and what apps will be required to do that. So I'm very passionate about it, and I think we're going to see a change in the next few years. But it really starts with holding up these math and science achievers as heroes and not nerds.
and so effectively they're born into a disruptive society, which is becoming more disruptive, and they are naturally becoming disruptive themselves.
Absolutely. And this idea of really, with low barriers to entry, I can sign up for services, I can procure those services, and I can all of a sudden stand up a little company, is something that you're going to see more and more young people do. And again, some will succeed, but some will fail, but they're willing to take that risk early in their life. And I think that's just a wonderful, and I think the ubiquity and the access of this technology through the cloud, through mobile devices, through social media, That's what's so amazing about this time. I hear this all the time. People say it feels different, because it is different. This is a fundamentally different time than we've ever seen in the past.
Talking about the cloud, it is transformative and it is changing, and it's happening very, very quickly. And we're still really trying to get our heads around all of the implications the cloud is going to do for us. But how will it transform business in the future?
Well, the way it will transform business is that the cloud will allow companies to stand up services and provide new kinds of services very, very quickly. You're talking about being able to, provision a new service in a matter of minutes. You're able to make that service available to your customers in a matter of minutes. And what used to involve buying servers, buying software, buying middleware, licensing all that, making sure you were in compliance, making sure then that the applications could be tuned to your industry. That would take months in the past. So if you and I started the company 15 years ago, the first thing we would do is get a little bit of venture capital or our personal savings or put it on a credit card. We would buy some servers. We put those servers in our house, and then we would have to buy application software, and the whole thing went from there. And that whole process might take a few months. Now all that can be done in minutes on the internet, in the cloud, and your application could be hosted on Google or hosted on Amazon or hosted at VMware or hosted at any one of these places in order to make it available to customers. That's how it's changing the startup game. How it's changing the established game is that companies historically have had to be very, very careful and also spend a lot of money on extra computing capacity. So if you're, for example, a retailer here in New Zealand, and you know that for 330 days a year, you need 100% of your computing capacity. But for the other 25 days that involve Christmas or other holidays around the year, there's another 50% of data center capacity that you need to support people coming into your stores and interacting and more purchases and all that. That would mean you'd have to go to your executive management and say, okay, that $20 million that we spent on building a data center, I need another $20 million to build another data center just for those 20 days a year. Now what you can do is you can say, I've got my data center, but for those 20 days, I'll simply burst into Amazon, or I'll burst into Google, or I'll burst into some local service provider here for that extra capacity, and I'll rent that capacity. I'll use it, and then it'll come back into, and maybe I'll put that application out into the cloud for a period of time. And that's scale. That's cost savings. That's a real change. Now you've got a board of directors that didn't have to approve another $20 million spend. That's changing the way business is done.
Do you think the security issue is dissipating?
I think the security issue will ebb and flow. I think there'll be very visible events where something happens, and unfortunately credit card numbers will get stolen or personally identifiable information will get stolen, and companies will get very, very concerned. And then it will fade down. I think that that will breed a culture of understanding what the risks are, and that means that, and I'm seeing it in our data, that more and more companies are willing to put more and more of their applications out into the cloud because the cost savings are just undeniable. And I think in the future, a lot of these concerns will be a little bit quaint and kind of antique, but for now, it's an evolutionary process. So I think right now, I would say in the last few months, they've come down, but now recent weeks in the U.S. with all this concern about what's happening in terms of what the government's doing, now they seem to be going up again. Let's
talk a bit about social media, because you mentioned your presentations, you get lots of questions these days, and people see it potentially as a little bit of a fad. Where's social media going to fit into this business landscape in the future?
Sure. So so as you know, when we do surveys, we see the vast majority of IT leaders that we survey they feel they must participate in social media, but they have no idea if they're getting any payback, and they either don't believe they're getting a payback or they believe that they don't know. There's no way to measure it. I think what you're going to see in social is that social is not a fad, and this idea that we can communicate and share experiences and make better choices based on that information is extraordinary. And what you're going to see is that where we spent decades building these sort of transaction processing-based systems, process the credit cards faster, or whatever, clear the trade faster. We then moved kind of to decision support systems, where it was really about how do I run my business better from a standard ERP standpoint. Now we're sort of moving to these relationship-based systems. And a relationship-based system is really where I'm taking information about my customers and captured a lot through social media, as well as about my current employees, and trying to find information that matches. And in those relationship-based systems, how can I find out who my most influential customers are? How can I find out commonality in things like LinkedIn networks or Twitter networks between my salespeople and their prospects, so I can make better matches and close deals faster? And I think that you're going to see that companies are going to slowly transition into using this information, not for nefarious outcomes, but for ways to figure out, how do I serve my customers better? So today, the simplistic example that you can give is that if one customer has 10,000 Twitter followers and another customer has 100 Twitter followers, the person who has 10,000 Twitter followers, there are nice tools you can buy to find out if that's really an influential customer. And that customer will get better customer service than the person who has 100 followers if they are in fact an influential social media user. And the idea is, how do I, as a company, move from being sort of a traditional make product and then sell that product, whether that's a service or whether that's a tangible product, to sort of a sense and respond? How do I quickly sense and quickly respond that to this customer, if I change the way I'm handling them right now as they're boarding the airplane and give them a better seat or give them, I will have a stickier customer and a more profitable customer and a more loyal customer. And that's how people will use social media in new ways going forward. And that's very, very exciting. And we will see in the future that all applications in the next 5 years will embed some level of social into them. They will become social because it's so powerful to learn about your customers in these new ways. And you'll also see other changes, things like email will drop. I mean, people just simply will communicate via social networks. They won't communicate via email unless it's something very formal that they want to write. We'll see. Our prediction is email will drop 35% per year for the next 2 years in terms of the absolute amount of email volume. So big changes ahead. Social's not a fad. Some of the companies may ebb and flow. Right now we're seeing, Facebook is got some challenges. They will likely get through those challenges. But I think this will probably be the year that Twitter does an IPO. You'll see the rankings ebb and flow. But the concept of using social to communicate with your customers in new ways, that will remain.
So it's almost like thinking about social as glue that co-creates value.
Absolutely. And the more people, and truly, the old network effect here, where the value of the network rises exponentially with the number of people using it, couldn't be more true for social. As more people get on these social networks, they become platforms, and they become treasure troves of information.
Finally, let's talk about big data. And one of the stories that interested me was this idea of making data more available and more open from the likes of governments and so forth. You had some interesting observations of what's been happening in New York and San Francisco. Yeah. Just tell us about some of those projects and the outcomes that have resulted from them.
Yeah. So what we've seen is that, as I say, the intersection of these forces. In this case, it's sort of big data with cloud and with mobility and with social. Really can and this is really what we're looking for in the future. So we're seeing one of the great examples are smart cities. So smart cities are cities that are understanding the value of this third platform and allowing people to differentiate on it. So in the case of New York, New York wanted to sort of reinvent themselves as a smarter city. So they ran about 15 hackathons where they said, how can we take the power of the third platform to drive new kinds of innovation? So they ran these hackathons. They opened up 900 data sets across, this is the things like train schedules and bus schedules and ferry schedules and restaurant information in terms of, Board of Health approval. And they were able to, throughout these hackathons, get 600 applications submitted. The kinds of applications they got were things like NYC 311, which is a service that allows you to, with your smartphone, report that a street needs repair, or report that a sewer is overflowing during a storm, or report that a street sign and the light is burned out. They got Rotify, which was an application that allows you in real time with analytics to see, is the ferry running late, is the subway running late, is the bus running late? Because the people on that, they've anonymized the data, but you can actually see the phones moving on these, and you can see when it's going to arrive and start to make predictions around that. They have applications that basically allow you to see, so whether they have restaurant recommendations, so things like Yelp, what's a good restaurant? Well, they have the opposite of that. They have restaurants you should avoid because they're not in compliance with the Board of Health. So restaurants called don't eat at this particular place. So these are really innovative things that people all say, oh, if I open up my data sets, I'm going to violate civil liberties in some way. You can actually create a lot of value, and you don't violate any civil liberties at all, and you can make it a better place to live. And that's really where some of the innovation comes in.
We know that governments aren't always to the forefront of innovation, but are they being kind of dragged kicking and screaming into this, do you think?
Oh, I don't think so. Well, some are, right? There's always examples where some are. But I think there are many governments. Some are in China, some are in the United States. Some are, the Netherlands is a good example of a city that's been very, very progressive, Amsterdam. So, in some of these areas, they're not. They're actually running to the opportunity. And I think some of that has to do with they've been so stodgy and so slow that they realize that if they can move forward, they actually don't have a lot of the legacy to leave behind, so they can move into the third platform and really take advantage of it.
And just finally, the one kind of takeaway that you think a business sitting there at the moment trying to think of the future from an IT perspective, what's perhaps the one thing that you think they should be focusing on at the moment?
Embracing these technologies, move toward these technologies. As I said earlier today, I see CIOs that fall into two categories. There are ones that want to get an attaboy or an attagirl for cutting their expense as a % of revenue, and there are others that want to be part of the business and partner with the business to teach them how to be an innovator on the third platform to grow the business. The people in the first category, I can see where that movie ends. They end up with no IT department barely at all, just a sort of hollowed out shell. The other side, those who run to this third platform, those are the ones who are in a cherished role in the organization because they're actually a place where innovation happens. And that means the business grows, and that means the company thrives.